Hey guys, I'm Max Lasser and I'm new, so thanks for having me. When I was watching Star Wars Rogue One, I found myself wondering whether the rebellion were really the good guys in all this. Right off the top, I know that I'm about to say some pretty terrible things about the rebellion, and it's all in good fun. I'm not a member of the Darth Vader youth or an evil colonialist. I just thought there were some interesting elements of stuff the rebels do that is a little weird. And now, obviously, this video is going to be 98% spoilers, so if you hadn't seen it, turn away. Now, first of all, the Empire is definitely pretty bad. I mean, we find out in this episode that Darth Vader lives in a lava castle, and I'm not even sure how you would describe his vision for that building to his architect without using the word evil. Yeah, so we'll go with a sloping, modern, neo-brutalist evil vibe, and for the bathroom I was thinking just one giant tube in the center. Because of the movie's darker tone, they were willing to admit that it's pretty hard to keep a rebellion comprised largely of assassins and criminals from doing some pretty morally questionable stuff. And it also seems like they don't have a great plan in place for when they win. I mean, it would be a shame if all those brave heroes risked their lives for the Death Star plans, just so that Luke Skywalker and some more brave heroes could risk their lives to destroy it and everyone on board, just to create a power vacuum that would only be taken over by another all-black wearing military dictatorship led by a red lightsaber wielding sadist, not to get 3.5 episodes ahead of myself. Now, admittedly, the Empire kills billions of people and controls the entire galaxy, so you could argue that it's worth doing anything to bring them down. But I just want you to consider for a moment how the rebellion might have looked to a random shop owner or bantha herder living in peace in the galactic Empire planet in the center of the galaxy who just wants to feed their family and send their kids to a good Empire school. One early example of just what the rebels are willing to do for the cause is Cassian shooting his Samwell Tarly-esque friend, the informant, in the back just because he might want to talk to the cops. This poor guy was literally out of breath from running to tell Cassian a secret. And I know he was written to be whiny and annoying, but aren't these the people the good guys are usually trying to protect, not shoot in the back? Now you might say, well, Han shoots Greedo first, but Greedo was an assassin sent to kill him, not a rebel informant who thought he was on Cassian's side. If Bodhi was a hero for smuggling Imperial information, isn't this sweaty guy a hero too? Meanwhile, Jyn Erso, daughter of Imperial scientist and architect of the Death Star, which at this point is actually under its codename Stardust, which is adorable, has been captured by the Empire for being a general criminal type. Now, in a major strike against the rebels the bad guys, Jyn is on her way to a labor camp. And I don't think there's any example of a noble or not absolutely monstrous labor camp, but hey, we never get to see the inside, so maybe they just spend their day making TIE fighter license plates. Anyway, Jyn is rescued by the rebellion. Well, rescued by force. Some would call it sort of a benevolent kidnapping. Okay, they went through all this effort to rescue her. The least Jyn could do is sort of come with them and hear them out. And hey, we're all good guys here, so even if we're on different pages, if we disagree, we can just go our separate ways, no hard feelings. Or not. Rebel Command informs her that the choices are Jyn goes along with the plan to help find her father, or she'll be sent right back to the labor camp where they found her, and into a life of snoring, tentacle-faced roommates and TIE fighter license plates for her. And this is actually even more sinister than it sounds, because we find out later in the movie that Jyn has been recruited so that the rebellion can secretly kill her father right under her nose. And sure, they don't tell her that at the time, but from the Rebel Command's perspective, the plan in the secret Rebel war room was to force a girl who hasn't seen her estranged father in 15 years to find her father so they can kill him while she watches. Thank God, later in the series, these guys color code themselves as good guys with blue lightsabers, because otherwise I might forget who I'm supposed to be rooting for. Now seems like a good time to go back and talk about Galen as a father, because it turns out he is a member of the rebellion, and this guy has some weird parenting strategies. First of all, he calls his daughter Stardust, and he calls the Death Star Stardust, which is a machine that destroys entire planets and turns them into dust. And I'm not a therapist, but that seems pretty screwed up to me. And sure, maybe he called her that on the off chance that she would be a part of a secret rebellion mission to steal the Death Star plans like 20 years later, and she'd have to know which tape to pick out from the Imperial library. But that can't be good for the psyche of a child, to be called the thing that's left after daddy's machine kills everyone. And I mean, that Stormtrooper doll. She's playing with a Stormtrooper doll while Galen is making elaborate plans of what to do when the Stormtroopers show up to kill them all, which as far as I'm concerned would be like Anne Frank playing with a little Nazi doll. And sure, he used to work for the Empire, and she probably had the toy for a while and might cry when it gets taken away. But talk about mixed messages. I mean, it's no surprise to me that Jyn grows up without an interest in politics when at age 6, life-size versions of her dolls kill her mom. After being forcibly hired for the Help Us Kill Your Dad mission, step 1 is to find Saw Gerrera. Now, Saw Gerrera is a rebel leader whose methods are so extreme that he's been forced out of the regular rebellion, which has already made made it clear that they're willing to murder their friends in the street and trick recruits into helping murder their dads. But Saw is even more extreme than that, sort of the ISIS to the rebellion's Taliban. The guy that maybe enjoyed killing stormtroopers so much that it started to make everyone feel weird when he wouldn't stop talking about it at dinner. And they kicked him out of the noble rebellion and announced they wanted to have nothing to do with him, until they needed him for anything. Saw then immediately lives up to his reputation when defecting Imperial pilot Bodhi Rook shows up at his doorstep and gets dragged around in a burlap sack and then tortured by a tentacle truth-seeking monster named Borgullet, which, by the way, everyone in Saw's camp cannot wait to see. They keep chanting Borgullet, Borgullet like this is the best possible Tuesday night entertainment on the planet. And they don't even bother to play Bodhi's message that he's risked his life to bring them before they knowingly drive him temporarily insane and throw him in a cell. Man, have you guys noticed what it's like to inform for this rebellion? You either get shot or dragged around and laughed at as you're part of the day's sideshow entertainment. This is all taking place on the Imperial occupied moon of Jeddah. And this is another really important point to me. This moon is basically under Imperial martial law. And if you believe rebel propaganda, shouldn't that be like a hellscape on Earth? I mean, that sounds pretty terrifying to me. So let's see what it's like to live under Imperial occupation versus, say, the neutral trading points on the Rings of Kafrene. Seems like martial law under the Empire is actually a relatively normal life. In fact, they let the blind Jedi Temple worker Chirrut Imwe openly preach about the Force on the ruins of his Jedi Temple. I mean, they pretty clearly have freedom of speech, and he and Baze are allowed to openly display their weapons. These are people who kill 20 stormtroopers at the first opportunity, and no one is bothering them under oppressive Imperial rule. And to cap it all off, the Empire doesn't appear to have any rules governing open-air tentacle street food, which is the same on the Rings of Kafrene and in Jeddah. In fact, when Saw says to Jin that Imperial flags are now raining everywhere, Jin simply says that she can't tell because she doesn't look up. Like, shouldn't you be able to tell at eye level that the evil Empire is totally ruling your lives? And I mean, these are the people we're throwing morality out the window to overthrow. And it seems like they're doing a pretty good job at keeping the peace. Now sure, maybe it's peace through terror, as Galen says at the start of the movie, but didn't Machiavelli say it's better to be feared than loved? And I'm not sure Saw Gerrera has a great high horse to stand on here, since he's one of the few movie characters to enjoy a heroic, noble death and a frequent use of burlap sacks. While an Empire squadron is on patrol, they get surprise attacked by some of Saw's men, and I'm not gonna fault anyone for using guerrilla tactics against a much more powerful and larger force. But Cassian sees one of Saw's men about to throw a grenade that might hit Jin and just shoots him in the chest. Now, Cassian might not have had a better option here because he was trying to save Jin's life, but this is another example of a larger point I'll be making soon. It is hard to keep the various factions of this rebellion together, and probably if they had managed to drive the Empire off, they would have been arguing pretty quick about why some guy from corporate shot their friend in the chest. And even if he was in the right, maybe the good guys in this movie could like take a 10-minute break from killing and betraying each other. Even the titular Rogue One mission is an example of how poorly run this operation is, because the Council decides that based on the unproven information they have, they can't risk sending fleets to Scarif to try to steal the Death Star plans. So this whole thing only works because the Rogue One team ignores the higher-ups completely. And while they're having this incredibly important debate, who gets all the floor time to give the rousing speech about hope? Jin, the arsonist and robber who they hired to kill her own dad. I mean, it sure would be great if anyone on this rebel council could display some leadership ability. And maybe they're not the ones who are going to be in charge once they take everyone down, but if they are, they're not doing a very good job so far. Another thing about all this. In this movie, we see stormtroopers serving a lot of different functions. Cops, prison guards, soldiers. And the rebels love killing them basically no matter what their job is. Some of these guys that got killed in the labor convoy probably spend a large portion of their day doing prison paperwork, which is fine if like stormtroopers aren't really people and they're just evil white soldiers. But a lot of these guys are probably normal Empire citizens who got drafted, maybe even as children, and were sort of conscripted into service, maybe even non-violently, just kind of cleaning prison cells or doing paperwork or being doctors. But as the rebels are attacking Scarif at the end of the film, we see them having a pretty cute conversation about who gets the most updated equipment. Having completed stage 1 of the mission, it's time for Project Kill This Girl's Dad to really get in motion. Here's the part of the film that really blows my mind. First of all, Jin tells Cassian that her father left her a message and that he loves her very much, and also left a glaring weakness in the Death Star dust because A, he's a loyal member of the rebellion, and B, he knew that with or without him, the Empire would finish the project eventually. And we know that because we just watched them blow up a city. Isn't it time for somebody to update the mission parameters? And Cassian still still wants to go forward with murdering Galen even after knowing he's been a spy on the inside the whole time, and now they want to kill him while his daughter is a 5-minute walk away? Now, of course, Cassian backs out at the last second, but still, if I was Jin, this guy would not have been my top choice for hand-holding on nuclear warfare beach. But the Rebel Command, who hopefully could do a better job than the Empire since they're trying to overthrow them, decides they still need to kill him, attacking a science base and losing a bunch of Rebel soldiers in the process. And I really feel bad for Galen, because if he's known he was going to be killed by a Rebel soldier, he would have given his daughter a Rebel soldier doll to play with. I cannot get over that doll. Up to this point, what I've been trying to convince you of is that the rebels do whatever they want in the name of the rebellion, and it's frequently not great. But right before the Rogue One crew leaves, Cassian basically says that himself. They've all done kind of gross stuff in the name of the rebellion. And if they ever had to stop, like if the rebellion ever ends and they just go back to their normal lives, all that murdering in the name of the rebellion is now just murdering. And this brings me nicely to my second main point. What everyone is doing all of this for. What would happen if the rebellion were to actually succeed? Let's pretend for a second that the Rebel Command were actually geniuses and right the whole time, and that killing Galen halted the progress of the Death Star, and somewhere down the line they were able to defeat the Empire's fleet and take over the galaxy themselves, or install someone else, but we'll talk about that in a bit. At that point, Saw Gerrera would still be alive, and we've seen in our world what happens when a violent rebellion throws out the current order without a solid plan for a transition of power. That's frequently an absolute mess. I mean, if you look at the Arab Spring, which was a revolution that sought to unseat a dictator, and it was sort of a coalition of people who just wanted to see a new government in place, by the time all the dust had settled, the Muslim Brotherhood had managed to take power, and probably Saw Gerrera faction would have been pretty loud in the discussion of who gets to run what. The guy with 2 tubes on his face probably would have ended up being Undersecretary of Agriculture. And when Saw's faction used their naturally brutal methods to stay in power, they would have faced their own rebellions. And how much different are you from the Empire at that point if you're willing to work with these kind of people in order to maintain control and reach your ends? And like, what is the rebellion's grand plan if they do succeed? Who is the plan for who's going to govern when they win? Yes, they very heroically managed to get the Death Star plans, and Luke Skywalker very heroically manages to blow up the Death Star, but it's a lot easier to kill people in charge than to lead. After the rebellion finally succeeds at the end of Episode 6, is it really any surprise that by the time Luke Skywalker's an old man, the dominant power in the galaxy is run by another guy who's so insecure that he has to change his voice in post? And I really want to hit this point again, because it's not just that the rebellion is incompetent, it's that when you depose a violent dictator with no plan for what's going to come after him, frequently it can be worse than it was before. When a rebellious faction conspired to assassinate Caligula in Rome, within 2 generations he was replaced by Nero, who is yet another megalomaniacal sadist, which by the way is pretty much what's happened so far in Episode 7. And there might have been some pretty positive side effects to the entire galaxy being under the Empire's rule. It's no longer canon, but in the Star Wars Extended Universe novels, the galaxy is frequently under attack from extragalactic forces like the Yuzong Vong. There's even a theory that the reason Emperor Palpatine was uniting the galaxy and creating all of these machines of war in the first place was to fight off galactic invaders. Because if evil bug monsters from beyond the Outer Rim come to kill everyone, it sure would be good if we were all on the same team. In fact, threats from other planets is probably the only thing keeping a lot of these planetary governments together. Earth is currently 270 countries. So before Alderaan was going to get blown up by the Empire, the planet of Alderaan was probably 270 Alderaan countries. So again, the fact that the Empire has all of the galaxy's resources consolidated in one place does have some positive side effects. It's like they always say, any asshole can blow up a Death Star, but it takes a carpenter to build one. And if you take away the genocide, it's a pretty impressive feat of military engineering. So yeah, why is it even worth taking down the Empire anyway? The rebels are the bad guys, end of story. Except that the Empire are Nazis who hate aliens. So even though a lot of what I said is true, you gotta kind of give them a pass on whatever they want to do, because at the end of the day, they're trying to take down Nazis. If you notice, the Empire has basically no aliens in it at all. The Empire looks like your stepfather's girlfriends. And to the rebellion's credit, they have aliens in the army, aliens on the council, and they even have a little alien admiral, and they make him a chair so we can see the battle. So you could sort of think of this movie as the Star Wars Inglourious Bastards. A bunch of people doing a lot of screwed up stuff to some innocent people, but who cares, because they're doing it to Nazis. And we have to live in concert with our alien brothers, E.T. phone home. And I know what you guys are gonna say. You're gonna say they do have an alien. What about Admiral Thrawn? But if you ask me, being the one alien as part of a group that's trying to kill and discriminate against aliens makes you a little bit of an Uncle Thrawn. So anyway, what we've learned in this video is that even though 8-year-old me thought that if I was in the Star Wars universe I'd be Luke Skywalker, 25-year-old me is more of a concerned galactic citizen writing an op-ed for the Coruscant Times, which probably isn't great. I've been Max Lasser, and I don't have a Twitter, but if you want to leave comments trying to convince me to join the light side, you can find me on Facebook or at @LasserMax on Instagram, and leave a comment in case I missed something terrible that the rebellion did, because much like the Galactic Empire, we encourage free speech. And please, if you're trying to convince people to the dark side, go ahead and hit share, like the video, send it around, and subscribe to New Rockstars for all kinds of Star Wars and non-Star Wars stuff. Bye.